Hey everyone, welcome back to Miniature Painting 101, a series of videos where I will teach you how to paint a miniature from start to finish and everything along the way. This is part 17 of my Miniature Painting 101 series, shading. You see, shortly after I posted my washes video, I was asked by several viewers what exactly is shading and how does it differ from washing. And the answer is basically very simple. Shading is adding a wash or shade into the recesses or edges of the model and not focusing on the entire area, just the recesses. And it's typically done post-highlight. And the big difference is it uses less product. So for this tutorial, just to show you how to shade and what shading is about, I'm going to use this granite that has already been sprayed with a metallic silver. As you can see, it looks great. It's the perfect color what you want for a granite, but it doesn't have any definition on the armor. And rather than wasting all of the wash, I'm just going to focus on the edges. And for this, I'm going to use a very thin, sharp pointed brush, as you can see there. And I'm going to use Drakenhoof Nightshade. That way I can tint the recesses blue and give it a nice blue tint in those areas and the crevices. So I begin by, of course, shaking up my shade. And I'm going to focus on I'm going to use the straight out of the lid to keep my brush nice and healthy. So I just put it in, and now I'm just going to apply it. As you can see here, I'm just going to take my time and slowly apply it to the recesses, starting with the feet, because they're the ones that typically stand out in this tutorial you'll see. And I'm just going to put the wash right into the recesses. Rather than focus on the entire area and then have to highlight over it, I can already do the highlights and then put the recesses in after. It's slightly changing the order of things, and it's just basically whatever look you're trying to go for. And if you end up putting too much shade into the crevices, or you cover areas you really don't want to shade, just feel free to use either another brush, a dry brush, literally a brush that's dry, or if worse comes worse, use your finger. Either one will be very good. I also recommend varnishing your model ahead of time. This model, for example, has been varnished with a satin varnish. It gives a great surface for shading afterwards. It gives a great surface, and plus, if you do make a mistake, you can clean it up later using a product such as mineral spirits, providing that you did seal your model properly. So as you can see here, I'm just taking the shade a little bit at a time and applying it to where I want it, as in the crevices and the recesses of the feet, the parts above the knees, all the cracks in the armor, the parts between the fingers, and as you see there, gives some great definition between the fingers and the wrists, the elbows, just basically all the armor, and just focusing on just those edges and the recesses. And this will give a lot of definition to the model. Another benefit of this is, as I said, you use less of the product, and it tends to dry a bit quicker since you're not covering the entire area. This is also a great method if you have a tool such as an airbrush, because that way you can already airbrush your highlights on top of your miniature, varnish it, and then use the shading afterwards just to apply some more definition to the crevices. And you see here, it's starting to take a little bit of a bluish tint, and now I'm applying it to the stomach and just the lower parts of the armor. And you see the shading really brings out some of the detail in the mask. Granites have some great definition on the helmets, and once you put this shade in the crevices, it really brings them out. Feel free to, you could also use a black. I just really loved the cold steel appearance for granites, so I tend to use the blue. Another great combination would be a blue and non-oil mixture, probably about 1:1. Just be careful when doing the shoulder pads, for example. You don't want too thick of lines, so I'm just going to try to get a very sharp line going along the edges, and if it gets too thick, I'll use a dry brush or my finger and just make sure to keep them relatively thin. The shoulder pads tend to be the areas where it stands out the most that you've done a post shading as opposed to a wash. For the back, it's pretty simple. I'm just going to apply it to all those crevices. As you can see, it makes them much darker, much more noticeable, and much more definitive. And that's what we're going for. And it's saving a lot of time. As you can see, I don't have to cover all the area. And since the highlighting is already done for me, I can just focus on the recesses. And it's really cool. That's the great thing about using these techniques, is that you can mix up the order. You don't necessarily have to go base coat, wash, highlight. You can highlight it first and then shade later. It just depends on what appearance you want. Do you want the whole area to be shaded and then gone over so that it's all tinted blue, or just the recesses? Both have their pros and cons, and basically it just comes down to what you prefer. As you see, this isn't taking me a lot of time. This is sped up by about 200%, so it's about twice the speed, but it's just not taking me much time at all, and it's going to those great recesses. And as you can see there, I just used a dried brush and wiped it off. And here's what the model looks like after it dried. Make sure to let your model dry entirely before deciding whether or not to re-shade it. It will dry slightly darker than before, and here it is. And as you can see, there's a lot more definition in these areas. You can see some great definition on the armor now. It is not just a generic one shade model. And if you're unhappy with the shading, after it dries, feel free to do another. You can change up the color if you want. Like, I could switch from a Dragon Nightshade to a non-oil, but I decided to just make it a little bit more dark. I decided to do another Drakenhoof Nightshade over selected areas, and here's what the model looks like afterwards. I once again just applied with a very sharp brush, applied it to all the recesses, and it looks great. There's the blue tint in all the areas and has some great definition to it. And that, my friends, is shading, and it's, as I said, just differs from washing based on the steps. So thank you very much for watching this Miniature Painting 101. I know it was a bit basic, but I promise to get more in the future. Stay tuned for part 18. And if you want to see more Miniature Painting 101s early, check out The Warp. Click on the link below for a free 14-day trial to my premium subscription channel. Not only do we get to see the next at least 10 episodes of Miniature Painting 101, you'll also get to see other front-to-back painting tutorials and some awesome wargaming content. So thank you very much. Until next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.